The Vatican was enveloped in an unusual silence. It was late at night, and the lights of the Sistine Chapel had been turned off hours ago. However, in a small private chapel, a single candle flickered, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. There, sitting on a wooden bench, was Pope Francis. His eyes were fixed on the crucifix before him, but his gaze seemed distant, as if he were seeing beyond that sacred image. He prayed in a low voice, his words almost whispered. "Lord, where are you? Why did you allow this to happen?" His voice trembled and his hands, clasped in prayer, tightened with force. It was a rare scene for a man who, to the world, was the ultimate symbol of faith and hope. In recent days, something had changed in the Pope. He, who always radiated a contagious serenity, now seemed to carry an invisible weight. His aides noticed that he spent hours in silence, avoiding meetings and commitments. Even his homilies, usually filled with warmth and compassion, seemed mechanical, as if they were recited out of obligation, not conviction. It was as if a shadow had settled in his heart. We then go back to a week earlier, when Pope Francis had visited a needy community in a remote region. He was there to bless a new school built with donations from the church, but also to listen to the stories of those people, to offer comfort and hope. However, something unexpected happened during that visit, something no one could have predicted. As he walked among the residents, greeting children and the elderly, he noticed a boy standing in the distance. The boy, about 10 years old, had deep eyes and a calm aura that contrasted with the commotion around him. He did not approach like the others. He just watched, as if waiting for the right moment. The Pope felt drawn to that silent presence. He stepped away from his entourage and walked toward the boy. When they were face to face, the boy whispered something in his ear. What did he say? No one knows. But the Pope's reaction was instant and visceral. He stepped back, as if struck by an invisible force. His face, once serene, now displayed an expression of shock and bewilderment. He looked around, searching for the boy, but he had already disappeared. Now, back in the Vatican, those words echoed in his mind, incessantly, like a mantra he could not decipher. What did he mean? Who was that boy? Pope Francis closed his eyes, trying to find peace, but the doubt persisted, gnawing at his faith like an unrelenting tide. The community of St. Michael the Archangel was a place forgotten by the world. Located in a remote mountainous region, the village was made up of simple houses of wood and clay, surrounded by arid fields and dirt roads. Poverty was visible on every face, but there was also an impressive resilience in those people. They knew that Pope Francis's visit was a rare event, perhaps unique in their lives, and they were determined to welcome him with the little they had. The Pope arrived on a sunny morning, but the blue sky contrasted with the grim reality of the place. He stepped out of the simple vehicle that transported him and was immediately surrounded by children, the elderly, and entire families who wanted to touch him, hug him, or simply see him up close. He smiled, blessed, and listened to the stories of those who approached, but his eyes searched for something or someone he could not identify. It was then that he saw him. On the edge of the crowd, a boy of about 10 years old stood still, watching everything with an unusual calm. He did not run like the other children, nor did he try to approach. His dark eyes seemed to carry a wisdom far beyond his years, and his presence was almost hypnotic. The Pope felt drawn to that silent figure, as if something were calling him. He stepped away from his entourage and walked toward the boy. The crowd, noticing the Pope's movement, parted in silence, as if they too felt the importance of that moment. When the Pope was a few steps away from the boy, he knelt, bringing himself to the child's height. "Hello, my son," said the Pope with a gentle, Smile. "What is your name?" The boy did not answer. He just stared at the Pope, as if seeing beyond him, beyond that reality. For a moment, the Pope felt uncomfortable, as if he were facing something he could not understand. Then, the boy whispered something. The words were so low that only the Pope heard them. He did not repeat them, nor did he share them with anyone, but his reaction was instant. His face, once serene, turned into a mask of shock and bewilderment. He stepped back, as if pushed by an invisible force, and his hands trembled slightly. "What did you say?" asked the Pope, his voice almost a whisper. But the boy did not answer. He simply took a step back, keeping his gaze fixed on the Pope, and then disappeared into the crowd. The Pope tried to follow him, but the people around him, unaware of what had happened, began to approach again, asking for blessings and attention. When he finally managed to break free from the crowd, the boy was no longer there. He asked the residents, but no one seemed to have seen him. It was as if the boy had evaporated into thin air. The rest of the visit was a blur for the Pope. He fulfilled his commitments, blessed the new school, and listened to the community's stories, but his mind was elsewhere. The boy's words echoed in his head, repeating incessantly like an enigma he could not decipher. On the plane back to the Vatican, he sat in silence, looking out the window as the city lights disappeared below the clouds. His aides noticed his distant expression, but no one dared to ask what had happened. They did not know that, at that moment, Pope Francis was questioning everything he had ever believed. Back in the Vatican, Pope Francis tried to resume his routine, but something had changed. The boy's words echoed in his mind like a disturbing mantra, interrupting his thoughts even in the calmest moments. He found himself distracted during meetings, lost in his prayers, and restless during the nights. His aides noticed the change. The man who always radiated a contagious serenity now seemed to carry an invisible weight. He avoided unnecessary contact, spent hours in silence in his private chapel, and sometimes seemed to stare into the void as if he were somewhere else. "Your Holiness, is everything all right?" asked Cardinal Ricci, his right-hand man, one morning after Mass. The Pope hesitated before answering. He looked at the Cardinal, his eyes reflecting an internal struggle he could not hide. "I don't know, my friend," he finally admitted, his voice low and weary. "There is something I cannot understand, something that deeply disturbs me." Cardinal Ricci remained silent, waiting for the Pope to continue, but he did not. Instead, he stood up and walked to the window, looking out. At the Vatican gardens below, that night, Pope Francis could not sleep. He sat at his desk, a pen in hand and a blank sheet of paper before him. He tried to write the words the boy had whispered, but his hands trembled so much that the letters came out illegible. Frustrated, he threw the pen on the table and buried his head in his hands. "Why is this affecting me so much?" he thought, feeling an anguish he had not experienced since his youth. He then decided to seek answers. The next day, he called his most trusted aides and ordered them to investigate the boy. "I need to know who he was," said the Pope, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "Where he came from, who his parents are, anything you can find." Out. The team immediately set out for the village of St. Michael the Archangel, but the answers they brought back were disheartening. No one in the community knew the boy. He had no family, did not appear in local records, and for all intents and purposes seemed never to have existed. "Your Holiness, it's as if he were a ghost," said one of the aides. Perplexed, Pope Francis was not surprised. Somehow he had already expected this, but instead of easing his mind, the discovery only increased his obsession. He began to spend hours in his private library, reading ancient texts, theological treatises, and even accounts of divine apparitions. He wanted to understand what had happened, but the more he searched, the more confused he became. In a moment of desperation, he knelt in his private chapel and prayed, as he had never prayed before. "Lord, please show me the way. What do those words mean? Who was that boy? Why did he come to me?" But silence was the only answer he received. Gradually, doubt began to seep into his heart. He, who had always been a beacon of faith for millions, now questioned the very existence of God. What if all of this is an illusion? What if I am wrong? These thoughts haunted him, especially during the lonely nights. He tried to hide his internal struggle, but it was impossible. During a general audience, he began to speak about the importance of faith in the midst of doubt, but his words sounded empty, even to him. The faithful noticed his lack of enthusiasm, and the cardinals began to whisper among themselves, concerned about the state of their leader. Cardinal Ricci tried again to approach him. "Your Holiness, perhaps it is time to rest. You are wearing yourself out." The Pope looked at him, his eyes tired but determined. "I cannot rest, my friend, not until I understand what happened." And so, Pope Francis's obsession continued, consuming him day after day. He knew he needed to return to the village to face the mystery head-on. But deep down, he feared what he might find. The investigation into the boy continued, but each new clue seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Pope Francis's aides interviewed all the residents of the village of St. Michael the Archangel, but no one could remember seeing the boy before that day. He did not appear in photos, had no records at the local school, and for all intents and purposes seemed never to have existed. "Your Holiness, it's as if he were an apparition," said one of the aides, visibly disturbed. "Something that does not belong to this world." Pope Francis listened to the report in silence, his fingers drumming on the wooden table. He did not know what to think. Part of him wanted to believe that the boy was just an illusion, a product of his tired mind. But another part, deeper down, knew that it was real. The words the boy had whispered were real, and they had struck him like an arrow straight to the heart. He then decided to expand the investigation. He contacted experts in theology, historians, and even psychologists, hoping to find some explanation, but the answers he received were vague and unsatisfactory. "It could be a divine manifestation," suggested a theologian. "An angel, perhaps, or a hallucination caused by stress," opined a psychologist. The Pope was not convinced by any of the explanations. He knew there was something more, something beyond human comprehension. Meanwhile, doubt continued to gnaw at his faith. He began to question not only the existence of God, but also the purpose of his own mission. If God exists, why does he allow so much suffering? Why does he allow innocent children to go hungry, entire families to live in misery? These questions echoed in his mind, incessantly without answers. In a moment of desperation, he decided to return to the village of St. Michael the Archangel. Perhaps, being there, he could find some clue, some sign that would help him understand what had happened. The journey was long and lonely. This time, he traveled without his usual entourage, accompanied only by a driver and a discreet bodyguard. He wanted to be alone, in silence, to reflect. When he arrived at the village, he was greeted with surprise and joy. The residents did not expect to see him again so soon. He walked through the dirt streets, greeting people with a smile, but his eyes searched for something or someone he could not find. He spent hours talking to the residents, asking about the boy, but the answers were always the same. No one knew him. No one had seen him before or after that visit. Frustrated, the Pope decided to spend the night in the village. He slept in a simple house, offered by a local family, but sleep did not come. He spent the night awake, looking at the starry sky through a small, dusty window. It was then that he had a vision. He did not know if he was awake or asleep, but suddenly the boy was there before him, with his deep eyes and calm aura. This time he spoke clearly without whispers. You are searching for answers, but the answers you seek are within you. The Pope tried to respond, but the words did not come out. He felt paralyzed, as if trapped in a dream. Faith is not about certainties, the boy continued. It is about acting with love even when everything seems lost. And then, as before, the boy disappeared. The Pope woke up suddenly, sweating and gasping. He looked around, expecting to see the boy, but he was alone. The house was silent, and the only light came from the moon shining through the window. He spent the rest of the night in vigil, reflecting on the vision. The boy's words echoed in his mind, but now he felt a lightness he had not felt in weeks. Next day, he returned to the Vatican with a new determination. He did not have all the answers, but he knew he needed to continue his mission, not out of certainty, but out of love. Pope Francis returned to the Vatican with a sense of peace he had not felt in weeks. The vision he had in the village of St. Michael the Archangel had deeply moved him, but it had also brought a clarity he had not expected. He still did not have all the answers, but now he knew that the answers he sought were within him. He decided to share his experience with Cardinal Ricci, his right-hand man and longtime friend. I saw the boy again, said the Pope, his voice calm but laden with emotion. He told me something that changed everything. Cardinal Ricci listened attentively as the Pope described the vision and the boy's words. When he finished, the Cardinal remained silent for a moment, reflecting on what he had heard. Your Holiness. Perhaps he was truly an angel, suggested the Cardinal, his voice filled with reverence. A messenger from God. The Pope smiled, but his gaze was distant. I do not know what he was, he admitted, but I know what he taught me. Faith is not about certainties. It is about acting with love, even when everything seems lost. Cardinal Ricci nodded, but still seemed concerned. And the doubts, Your Holiness, do they still torment you? The Pope sighed, looking at the crucifix on the wall. The doubts are still there, he admitted. But now I understand that they are part of the journey. Faith is not about having no doubts. It is about continuing to believe, even with them. In the days that followed, Pope Francis resumed his activities with a new energy. He preached about the importance of love and compassion, even in the midst of life's uncertainties. His words resonated deeply with the faithful, who felt a new hope in their hearts, but the Pope knew that his journey was not yet over. He still needed to face the mystery of the boy and the words he had whispered. One night, as he prayed in his private chapel, he felt a familiar presence. He looked up and saw the boy standing before him with his deep eyes and calm aura. You have understood, said the boy, his voice soft but filled with authority. The Pope felt a wave of emotion sweep through his body. Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling. The boy smiled but did not answer directly. I am what you need me to be, he said. A messenger, a reminder, a reflection of your own faith. The Pope felt tears streaming down his face. He finally understood. The boy was not a threat to his faith, but a confirmation of it. Thank you, he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. The boy took a step back, keeping his gaze fixed on the Pope. Remember, he said, his voice echoing like a distant bell. Faith is not about certainties, it is about acting with love. And then, as before, the boy disappeared. The Pope was left alone in the chapel, but he felt a peace he had not experienced in a long time. He knew that doubts might still arise, but now he had the tools to face them. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Vatican gardens below. The sky was clear, and the stars shone like diamonds. He felt a deep connection to the universe, as if he finally understood his place in it. Thank you, Lord, he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. Thank you for showing me the way. Pope Francis resumed his activities with a new perspective. The boy's words, "Faith is not about certainties, it is about acting with love," became the center of his mission. He preached about the importance of living faith through actions, even in the midst of doubts and uncertainties. During a general audience, he shared part of his experience with the faithful without revealing specific details. "Sometimes God sends us unexpected messengers," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "They remind us that true faith is not about answers, but about love in action." The faithful listened attentively, feeling a new hope in their hearts. Pope Francis continued to work tirelessly, helping the poor, defending the marginalized, and promoting peace. He knew that doubts might still arise, but now he had the tools to face them. The boy never appeared again, but his legacy lived on in the heart of the Pope and in those he touched. He proved that faith does not need certainties to be powerful. It only needs to be lived with love. And you, what do you think the boy said to Pope Francis? Leave your theory or what this story meant to you in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Faith may be a mystery, but love is something we can all practice. Together we can spread more stories like this and make the world a better place. Until next time.